days at the stick. From who's got it better than us to brick by brick. It's always the 49ers way, from off-season to game day. Yeah, we talk back. It's the 49ers Cutback.
It's 49ers Cutback Podcast time. It's time to talk about them wide receivers. Guys, weapons for Trey Lance. Kyle Shanahan can scheme up to have the young guy get the ball to. It's going to be a very eclectic group because there's a lot of guys available for the 49ers in free agency, but which ones actually make sense? There's high-end guys, Alex, but are those high-end guys even close to being on the 49ers radar?
Look, it's going to be harder on the high-end guys, right? Because cap space, you don't want to necessarily eat up too much room. You also want to be able to pay Deebo Samuel. So there's that. It's a little bit harder to pay the top-end guys,
Right.
But there's still a lot of names, still a lot of options, still a lot of guys that can do a lot of things. And you and I looked at this list, and we talked about it, and I put some names, and we added it in, and you had plenty of names that were already on my list already, and it's like, okay, we can make this work. But it's a long list, so TCC, Cutback Crew, Faithful, buckle up, because there's a lot of names. And listen, I get it. People are really excited about the draft class at wide receiver, all the speed. There's also some speed in the free agency room.
Yeah.
A lot of speed in the free agency room.
Well, the one thing you can do is if you feel a lot of the holes in free agency, especially on cheap, guys in like the second or third wave, then you don't have to worry about that in the draft. You can get players as best available.
Mm-hmm.
So that way, if you do come across a receiver in the draft, you can draft him as best available. And the 49ers have plenty of room in the receiver for improvement. And also just because you only currently have two guys under contract right now, of course, we all know exclusive rights free agent Jauan Jennings will be back. He's too cheap, and he also played at a very high level. But it doesn't mean you're not looking to improve that room. You do not want to bring back some of the guys that you had on the team before, like Travis Benjamin. Of course, River Craycraft went all the way across the country to go to the Miami Dolphins. But we don't want to see those kind of guys on the roster. You want to move forward. You want to improve the room. And I think that there's guys out there that they can do that with that are a lot cheaper than you might think they are.
Agreed, Ant. There's tons of names. Let's start with one of the first guys on the list that he's on my list, but he's on my list in the sense that I like all his potential, his speed, all those other things. Injuries is the big concern. Can this guy stay healthy? A guy that you were like, we need to talk about this guy, Will Fuller.
Yeah.
Will Fuller is a guy who has been not only speedy, Ant, but a guy who shows the big play potential, flashes all the positive things that you want to see about taking the top off the defense. Did so with Deshaun Watson, a young quarterback, mobile with a big arm. Oh man, Trey Lance, young quarterback, mobile, big arm. It almost makes too much sense. He's been injured a lot, suspended the first part of last season as well. He's not going to cost a lot of money, but why does this make sense? Do the Niners need to take this chance, take this risk?
It makes sense for a couple reasons. Number one, you've seen Kyle Shanahan move in the direction, since he got to San Francisco, of making sure he had one guy that could take the top off the defense, Marquise Goodwin. When Marquise Goodwin was gone, then they brought in somebody else like Travis Benjamin. They always want to have some guy that can, take the top off and then allow these other guys to play underneath. It really does help in the play action game. But the 49ers went away from that a little bit last year. Travis Benjamin couldn't block, but they had Jimmy Garoppolo at quarterback. He wasn't a guy that, took shots down the field, a lot. So it wasn't about, the teams didn't really respect those guys as much as you probably could have. Trey Lance being involved in the game plans now shifts that back to where you want a speedy receiver. You know who three receivers are. Adding that speed element to that wide receiver core is very necessary for this 49ers team. That is going to give, Deebo Samuel, George Kittle, those guys able to operate underneath in the mid part of the field where they want to operate. So I think that this is a necessary move, and that's why speed options are who the 49ers are going to be targeting, whether that's in free agency or the draft. And I think that's why everyone is so high on some of the draft picks. But there are guys like Will Fuller who make a lot of sense because, yes, when he's injured, it sucks. But when he's healthy, he's one of those guys that definitely changes how your offense runs the field and is able to make plays down the field. So I think that he's somebody you have to target. The only question I have for him, is it going to be $10 million like Miami paid him last year? I don't think the 49ers would pay $10 million for a third, potentially fourth wide receiver. It would have to be a lot cheaper. But I think because he has the elite speed, he has to be on their radar.
You're not wrong, Ant. He has to be on the radar. The speed is phenomenal. It's off the charts. All of those things are accurate. The $10 million number is a little terrifying for a guy who hasn't consistently stayed healthy, for a guy who hasn't been able to do things. He doesn't have a single season under his belt, not one, where he's played and been available for 16 games. Not one. That's not worth $10 million. Now, is there a team that looks at all the skill sets and all the things he can do and is like, you know what, it's worth the risk? 100% there are teams that could do that. I don't know if Miami Dolphins are a team that would bring him back in, paying him that amount of money, but there are some teams who may be desperate and feel like give this guy an opportunity to be a wide receiver one with all the speed and everything else he does. He could do it. He's had a handful of seasons, and despite the fact not playing, the heavy amount of games, where he's put up really good receiving numbers. 879 in 2020, 670, 600 plus in 2 separate seasons, having only played 12 games or more in those seasons, or 12 games or less, in those seasons. Those are really good numbers for only playing in 12 games, missing 4 games on the year. Those are, trending towards being 1,000-yard seasons and big opportunities for him. The touchdown number has also been extremely high for a guy who doesn't play a lot as well. So, yes, this is a guy that is worth the risk, but it's going to be worth the risk at a price, at a certain number. And I don't think that number is going to be very, very much higher than about $4 million if you're San Francisco.
Yeah, I think the 49ers are looking to get explosive players, though.
Agreed with you.
You want to have explosive players around Trey Lance. Would this guy be the first option? I don't know. They're going to kick the tires, though, and see what that money is going to be. But I think there's other options that may be cheaper that we're going to talk about. But Will Fuller is somebody for everyone to keep their eye on because you just don't know what his market is going to be. And if the market falls down far enough where the 49ers can pick him up, they do that. I mean, this is what happened, right, in the offseason. I think it was 2020 or 2019 where Le'Veon Bell became available. And it was like, well, his market value was low enough where the 49ers at least showed interest. Could Will Fuller be one of those guys that all of a sudden his market's not what you thought it was and they could possibly bring him in? It could happen. So keep an eye on it.
Definitely keep an eye on it. And another name to keep an eye on is T.Y. Hilton. Yeah. T.Y. Hilton, an older guy, but still a speedy wide receiver, a veteran presence, a guy who knows how to get open and can take the top off the defense at times. He's coming off a couple of injuries, but before those injuries, he was a relatively healthy wide receiver in this league. Didn't miss a lot of games. The projected market value right now is about $6.2 million for T.Y. Hilton. He made $8 million last year, so $2 million less than Mr. Will Fuller did. This does make sense, Ant. My only question is how much is still left in the tank? Because he's starting to get up there in age. And a guy who can take the top off the defense, the older you start to get, the harder it is to continue doing those things, play in, play out, game in, game out, for now a 17-game season in the league. Is this a realistic option? Is this a possibility?
Yeah, I think it makes more sense when you're part of a rotation like the 49ers have.
It's also true.
You're not going to be asked to run every single one of those routes. I think your role that he would be playing is pretty equivalent to what you've seen from Emmanuel Sanders in 2019 for the 49ers. Okay. A guy that could occasionally get down the field and down the seam and make a big play, but made a living over the middle and then on the outside, and somebody that you feel comfortable throwing the ball to. I mean, that's one of the things you want for Trey Lance. You want guys that he feels confident they're going to be in the positions they need to be, so when he's looking for them, they're there. So I think that a guy like this makes a lot of sense. I think I equate his ability to where Emmanuel Sanders was in 2019. I think that's a really good comp. And I think that if you're looking for that type of role, $6.2 million might be a little much for a third wide receiver, but you like the elements that he's going to be able to add. And if he is ring chasing, if he does want to get a ring, coming in playing with a dynamic quarterback like Trey Lance and playing alongside Deebo Samuel and Brandin Aiyuk might be pretty enticing. So T.Y. Hilton might be interested in doing something like that. So I would keep an eye on it, but I wouldn't rule it out. But I think what a specific role you're going to get out of him.
Correct, and I do think the $6.2 million number is a bit much. Especially since the production has dropped the last 3 years. It's been the lowest production of his entire career, his last 3 seasons, and it's steadily gone down. Now, some of that is health. Some of it, I think, fairly could be relegated to quarterback play.
Yeah, it doesn't help when you have Jacoby Brissett as the quarterback.
Or Phillip Rivers at the end.
Yeah, and even Carson Wentz, you know what I mean?
He's up and down.
It's not the same Carson Wentz that was playing, for the Eagles. It's a little bit different. He wasn't as good.
This is not the MVP version of Carson Wentz.
No, and of course T.Y. has, diminishing skills as well, but I think there's still enough in the tank that you could get a 2019 version of Emmanuel Sanders out.
That's fair, Ant. That's fair. I don't want it at $6.2 million, but if you can get that kind of production out of T.Y. Hilton, and I think all signs point to him still being able to do those types of things, then this does make sense. It 100% does. Juju Smith-Schuster, though, is another interesting prospect and possibility for the San Francisco 49ers. This is a guy who's still 25 years old. He's not super old. He's coming off of some injuries and things of that nature, but I think his skill sets translate very well to San Francisco, the scheme and what they want to do. Can this work? Can the number work? I don't think he's going to command a whole heck of a lot of money. I know he made about $8 million last year. this is definitely a better number 3 name than I think in terms of completion overall as a wide receiver than the other 2 guys we talked about. But I don't know if the top end speed's there.
The top end speed's not there. What you're looking at is conversion rate. I mean, this guy converts on third downs. This guy makes tough catches and gets yards after the catch. Not to the level that some of the other guys are, but a little bit better version of Jauan Jennings. I mean, that's really what it comes down to. He's a better version of Jauan Jennings.
I like that.
Jauan Jennings is a great blocker, and Juju's physical enough to be that. Question is, do you need a duplicate? You know what I mean? Do you need another guy that's like Jauan Jennings, or are you ready to just roll and let the kid develop? I think that the 49ers don't mind adding players that are similar. You saw it, Mohamed Sanu, Jauan Jennings, guys that are big body that, can block and then, convert on third down and make big plays that way, score touchdowns. Juju has a knack for finding holes in zone and then being able to make the catch and fall forward for the first down. That's something that's always valuable to a team. We've heard him linked to the 49ers for a few years now. I think this would be something they kick the tires on. So, yeah, I think he's somebody they're interested in. But at what number? I don't think you're paying that guy $8 million. And that's why I think it actually might be more likely for Jauan Jennings to be, that role in that guy and them not pay Schuster. So I think Schuster, you have to keep an eye on him, but I don't know if they'll go that route.
And I think Juju has always operated better in systems where he hasn't been a wide receiver one. He's been a better option when he's not the guy who's taking up, the majority of the number 1 DB's reps, snaps, and things of that nature. I also don't want to put a lot of stock into Juju's decline since Antonio Brown left, because since Antonio Brown also left, there's been a steady decline in Ben Roethlisberger as a quarterback. Yeah. So I don't think it's necessarily fair to correlate the two. Correlate that Juju has dropped off since AB hasn't been there. Juju dropped off with a combination of having to be forced to be a number 1 wide receiver, playing with a quarterback with a diminished skill set. I don't think it's necessarily a perfect representation of who he is as a wideout. And I think a change of scenery would actually be probably one of the best things for him. The question is that it's going to cost you a little bit something if you're Juju. I don't know if there's a team out there that views him as a number 1 right now, currently. And that's crazy because he's 25.
Yeah.
He's 25 years old. But if you want to change the scenery may help your career. It may help you in terms of being able to get that big contract down the road. And you're right. The Niners don't shy away from bringing in guys with similar skill sets. I don't think anyone would argue that Juju Smith-Schuster has more upside potentially as a receiving option than Jauan Jennings. The question is we still don't necessarily know what Jauan is going to be. Where is that ceiling at? What else can he continue to develop in? Also, Jauan is one heck of a run blocker in the system. Yeah. Can Juju replicate those things? Maybe he can. Maybe he can't. It's definitely worth taking a look at, though. And I think the Niners could do that without having to spend a whole lot of capital in order to bring him back in. I think this is a more viable, reasonable option than it was a handful of years ago when people were talking about, Juju, he's going to be maybe the Niners. I think right now his stock is, I wouldn't say fallen, but it's dropped enough now that this is an option the Niners can feasibly consider without having to overpay to bring him in.
Yeah, I think a place that he would actually fit really nice is the Jets. As they move on from Jamison Crowder, playing somebody in the slot, I think he would make a lot of sense, for Wilson there. Somebody he could rely on to, convert on those plays. We know that that's something you need from that offense. You need the Kendrick Bournes, you need the Jauan Jennings. So Juju Smith-Schuster going to one of those teams would make a lot of sense. But, if the number's down far enough, yeah, I think you have to keep the Niners in mind.
Yeah, definitely do, Ant. Yeah, definitely do. Who's another name that you're thinking of that you're looking at on that list of wide receivers, that very ridiculously stupid long list of free agent wide receivers that you're going, hey, let's bring this dude in?
I think I'm going to go with John Ross. John Ross is the guy that I talked about last year. He's somebody I've been interested in for a while, so I'm going to bring him up now because I do think that Kyle Shanahan had an affinity for him in that draft. He really, really liked John Ross, but Ross was going to go, in the top 15 picks, and he knew he couldn't get him. So he needed to go another route in that early on, but he would love to get John Ross. So I think that there's still that avenue. He didn't make a lot of money playing for the New York Giants, but he played decent. And that's with a really bad quarterback. You get him in with Trey Lance, and all of a sudden now Ross can take the top off the defense in a big way. Here's a guy that can stretch the field. He's a cheap option to be your 3rd/4th wide receiver, depending on situation and personnel grouping, but provides something different from the other guys that are on your team. He's still a very good route runner, and he moves seamlessly. You can run the reverses and things like that with him, and he's dynamic with the ball in his hands. To me, this just screams natural fit for the 49ers. Go out there, get him in, and let him do the things he do. He's a definite better upgrade from Travis Benjamin. He's an upgrade, from Marquise Goodwin. So I think this is a guy with, first-round talent who hasn't maybe played with the best situations, including when he played in Cincinnati. He didn't have the best quarterbacks there. So I think you get him into a situation where Kyle Shanahan can scheme him open, get him the ball going over the middle sometimes, and then most of the time, though, get him down the field, stretch the field, and let Trey Lance test that arm. Let's see how far you can really throw a kid.
Better route runner than Travis Benjamin, I think, right now at this point of his career, and still has the top end speed. Ant can add things as a slot receiver for this team. Look, I think there's one thing here too that a lot of people don't necessarily think of when it comes to John Ross, because they look at numbers and production and it's just not there, right? I think the most 504 yards receiving is the most he's had in a single season. Started one game last year for the Giants, finished with 224 receiving yards on the season and a couple of really big plays for them over the top, down the field, and things of that nature. This guy just fits. If you watch the film, everything about him screams Kyle Shanahan. Running him on reverses, the way he sees the field, puts his foot in the ground, and gets up and explodes on tape. The middle crossers he runs, the deep routes, the way he runs his routes, accelerates, gets guys to open up and turn his hips, stop on a dime, and sit open in the zone or sit open in man. It just kind of, it seems like Kyle Shanahan.
Mm-hmm.
It seems like a Kyle Shanahan guy, kind of like you talked about. This is Kyle Shanahan really wanted him in that draft. The big thing for me is, and I've heard this from a lot of people, is he hasn't proven anything anywhere, and you'll be bringing in this guy who hasn't proven anything. Trent Sherfield was the same way. I think 49ers fans fell in love with Trent Sherfield in training camp, with what he was able to do in the system. I think this is a better version. This right here, what he could add to this offense with Trey Lance in it, would be better than what we saw from Trent Sherfield in training camp this past season.
I think you have to be careful of just looking at production. You have to also look at the circumstances that provide that production.
No quarterback in Cincinnati.
How many other times have you seen guys, and Kurt Warner's a perfect example, who couldn't even make a roster? He's being a grocer, and all of a sudden he's doing big things. For 49er fans, Dwight Hicks, he's working at a store. He comes back, and all of a sudden he's a Pro Bowler. This happens all the time. You get the right guy into the right situation, and he can make something happen for you. If he didn't fit the 49er scheme, we wouldn't be talking about him. But he fits what Kyle Shanahan wants to do, and he's one big year away from. Look at Kerry Hyder. He gets into the right system, and all of a sudden, he's out making money again. Every time he gets to Chris Cassera, magic happens. Put the right players in the right situations, they can make plays for you. He's a dynamic talent. If you bring him in and he doesn't work out, you know what he is? He's a cheap option. He didn't hurt you any.
It was a cheap option that you don't necessarily have to put a lot of guaranteed money into the contract.
No, you could give this guy $2-3 million, but the impact he can have, could be huge for your football team.
Way more than
and you said his best year was 500 yards. Is as a third or fourth wide receiver, he's adding 500 yards to your offense, and those are explosive plays down the field. That means Brandin Cooks, Deebo Samuel, and George Kittle are having a better season.
And his touchdown number is insane. The amount of touchdowns he has, 20+ yards on 20+ yard targets, is nuts.
You know what teams aren't doing? They're not loading the box and letting John Ross go one-on-one with your corner on the outside.
Nope.
If that guy is a cover 3 guy who's slow and they can't get their hands on him because he's a little bit slippery to get your hands on him, he's going to beat you down the field because now they have to worry about Trey Lance's big arm. This isn't Jimmy Garoppolo. This is Trey Lance. And that is a big difference because that dynamic is a part of the game. So John Ross unlocks a different part of Kyle Shanahan's offense.
Agreed with you there, Ant. And speaking of guys who can unlock a different aspect of Kyle Shanahan's offense with the speed, Jakeem Grant does a lot of things. The speed aspect, the deep shots down the field, as well as in the return game. The guy is very, very dynamic. Yes, a smaller wide receiver. Yes, not necessarily the most physical guy in the entire world, but a guy who's, again, played in Miami in a very unstable situation with quarterback questions abound and aplenty. Hasn't necessarily had all the things. Hasn't made a lot of money. Hasn't really done anything to make you think he's going to make a lot of money. A cheap option, a speedy option, Ant. Why do you like Jakeem Grant? Why does it make sense?
I like the flexibility. I think you could line him up in the backfield and you can line him up outside. I'm not looking at this guy to be one of your top 3 wide receivers. I'm looking for a specific skill set from your 4th or 5th guy. You bring him in and use him in dynamic ways to get him the football in open space, screen passes, line him up in the backfield, pitch him the ball occasionally. But then he also is dynamic in the return game. So I think he adds aspects to your roster that you don't currently have. They tried Brandon Aiyuk in the return game. It didn't work. They went to Deebo Samuel, and Deebo Samuel can do it because Deebo Samuel can do everything.
Shocking.
But you don't want Deebo Samuel doing that. Whenever you can add somebody that has a little bit different skill set than the other players on your team, it's enticing. And I think there's other avenues that he hasn't been used yet that they can use him. So I think that he's an option for the 49ers to bring in, kick the tires on. Once again, another cheap guy. You're looking to bring cheap guys in to fill out that roster, and bringing in guys with different skill sets is the key because you want to have a bunch of different tools in the tool belt, not a bunch that look the same.
Speaking of guys with different tools in the tool belt, and one of my favorite wide receivers in this entire free agent class, Isiah McKenzie, out of Buffalo. started to really show what his potential could be. Buffalo there at the end of the season. They could bring him back. They could put some money in there and invest some time with him. But they have a lot of wideouts there. They're really high on Gabriel Davis, obviously. Yeah. They love themselves some Stephon Diggs. You drafted Marquez Stevenson, hoping that he could be something, another speedy guy that could be a playmaker for them and take the top off the defense and do some of the things they necessarily weren't seeing from Isaiah McKenzie with the speed aspect. Well, he showed it in a big way and had a couple of huge monster games. Guy who can run the football for you on fly sweeps, little jet tosses, a guy who can return in the return game, and is now starting to develop and show what he could be as a wide receiver with the route tree and running different things. I love this option a lot. The real question is just going to be, does someone else love him and is willing to pay him, a little bit more to make sure you secure him and bring him into your organization and your roster? If the Niners could find a way to get this guy in a couple-year deal, pay him $6, $7, $8 million total over the contract, $4.5 million, I really like this option. It adds something in the return game immediately. It takes pressure off of Deebo Samuel in that respect, takes some pressure off of Brandon Aiyuk, and still gives you the over-the-top stuff and the dynamic stuff at the wide receiver position.
It appears his market's like $2.5 to $4 million.
Then give it to me.
The question is the New York Giants going to go after him? Because right away, that makes sense. Their offensive coordinator leaves, he goes to the Giants, becomes a head coach, and all of a sudden you want to fill the roster with cheap options that know your system and that you already know how to do dynamic things with.
Correct.
You're right. He fits the system. The same reasons I like Jakeem Grant is the same reason I like Isaiah McKenzie.
Shocking.
There's a specific skill set that goes there, and I know there's a lot of people that have been pushing, we need quick, small wide receivers. Not so much about that. It's about what they can add to the roster in a variety of different ways. McKenzie's probably put it the most on display, like you said, with the fly sweeps and the things that he's able to do.
I would say of the guys we've talked about, right, he's not of all the guys we talked about, the last couple of guys that we've talked about, he's shown it recently more than, I guess, John Ross and Jakeem Grant.
See, I don't put him in the same category as John Ross.
Well, no, I don't put him in the speed category and the route running. No, absolutely
no,
not.
I mean, even the type of player that you're getting. I think if you want to categorize Jakeem Grant and Isaiah McKenzie in the same, they're the same avenue.
Those two you can.
I think if you wanted to put Will Fuller and John Ross in the same category, you could.
That's
so
true.
When you're looking at a certain type of player to add to your roster, these guys are not the same, and you wouldn't value them the same. I think they're different in what they add to your football team.
I like that. That. It's fair.
Yeah, I just think there's different categories for these wide receivers. So you have to determine what you want. I think in a perfect world, the 49ers would love to get John Ross and get Isaiah McKenzie or Jakeem Grant because John Ross could take the top off continuously, and then you could use one of the other guys, in
a different role
to sprinkle in. Yeah, run some other things, get the return game as well. So
add the little extra dynamics and aspects to it, Ant. I do like that. Let's go back to some speed, guys. Let's talk about the guy with some speed, Ant. Let's talk about Marquez Valdez-Scantling.
Mm-hmm.
He's a mystery, man. He's an enigma. I can't figure it out. He's always talked about in high circles with the Green Bay Packers. They kept talking about him having big years and doing big things and huge things and putting up gigantic numbers and God, what a solid number 2. And he just never consistently put it together. There, anyway, with Aaron Rodgers and that scheme and that system there with LaFleur. The guy's going to understand the scheme. He's going to understand some things. He's got some size and he's definitely got some speed. What's that number going to be? And can the Niners do this and can they make this work?
I think it's going to be a big number. I do. I think he's going to get a pretty big number. I think Aaron Rodgers wants him to land wherever he is. He's kind of came out and said that he would love to have him. I think he would have been problems for the 49ers if he'd have played in that playoff game because I don't know if they'd have been able to cover him in the slot. The way he's able to take the top off the defense, the way he's able to run that deep fade, I think it fits what Aaron Rodgers likes to do. I don't know if the 49ers are going to have an opportunity to get him, but I wish they could because he's, once again, a speed element guy, somebody that can play in the slot. That Trey Lance could count on to get down the field and make plays.
And he's 6'4".
Yeah, he's 6'4". I mean, he's a big guy, and he can make big plays. I mean, this is right. The comp would probably be like Christian Watson, something like that. A dynamic guy that can take the top off. I think Watson's probably a better football player down the road.
Agreed.
But right now, Valdez-Scantling might be the option.
And he's 27.
I just don't know if the 49ers can afford it because I do think somebody's going to go out there and overpay this guy, for the skill set that he has. And he hasn't proven that he can consistently stay healthy either.
No, I mean, this is... As a number 3 option, I would love it. I absolutely would love it because this is a guy who's been, a 500-600, between 450 and 600, 700-yard receiver his entire career. He's never had a 700-yard season, but he did have a 690-yard season in 2020. So this is a guy who can add a lot to your wide receiver room, and you can do a lot of dynamic different things with. The problem is just going to be, what do those things look like? What do they do? How much is it going to cost you in order to bring him in and get him in? And I think you're right. I think 6'4", speedy, you can't teach those things. Right?
No.
You can't take a 5'10" guy make him 6'4". You can't do those things. He plays big. He doesn't play small. This is a guy who can go up in space and make plays. And I think there's a lot of teams that would love something like that. Don't think the Raiders aren't looking at something like this and going, hey, we could add this to our wide receiver room as well and make this a number 3 option, next to Hunter Renfrow, next to other guys out there in space. There's a lot of teams that are looking at this and going, this guy has a lot of skill sets. If we have a big-armed quarterback, this could help us in a big way. So I think it's a little bit harder of a sell in San Francisco because you might have to pay a little bit more than you'd like to. And I don't think right now, other than Deebo Samuel, you're going to have a wide receiver on the roster that's going to make a lot of money.
No, you're not. I mean, you're just not. And you can't really afford to pay a lot of wide receivers a lot of money on this group because you have a lot of players in other positions that are going to make money. George Kittle, highest paid tight end. We have Trent Williams, one of the highest paid offensive linemen in the league. So you have a lot of money going there. So you're going to have to be very cautious about how you spend your money. I don't think they're going to spend a lot of money on a third wide receiver. That's why I think some of these bargain basement guys are actually the way to go. And then you hit someone in the draft as well. There's plenty of talented guys who are very fast you could add. In fact, you might even add 2 wide receivers in the draft. But picking off some of these guys that could be impact players on a cheap number is important. I think you have to talk about Valdez-Scantling because of what he can provide to your football team. But as far as actual capabilities of being on this roster, I kind of put it on the lower end. I don't think it's actually a possibility. I think he's going to end up landing somewhere where somebody's going to overpay him. Somebody like the Chargers will lose Mike Williams and then fill the void with Valdez-Scantling. I think those type of things are going to happen.
Those types of things are a little bit more likely. And speaking of another guy that probably doesn't have a chance to land in San Francisco, and Odell Beckham Jr. is a name that always pops up.
Yeah.
Always, Cutback Crew and Faithful, pops up with the 49ers. He wants to be around Kyle Shanahan. Kyle Shanahan, John Lynch wouldn't mind Odell Beckham Jr. ending up in San Francisco. The only problem is it's always money. It always seems to be money, timing, and things of that nature. And I don't know if you all know this or not. The Los Angeles Rams won a Super Bowl. They're trying to run it back with the whole roster. He did tear his ACL in that Super Bowl game, which means he's going to miss some time. Means maybe not going to make as much money, and maybe a handful of teams would want to bring him in and pay him a little bit. And one of those teams might be the Los Angeles Rams. Does this even have a chance?
I think there's always a chance because whenever you can weaken a team in your division, you're looking to do it. But I just don't think that he's coming in, now that they won the Super Bowl there in Los Angeles. I think he's looking to run it back. I think he would take a little bit of a discount knowing he's coming off an ACL and then try to cash in the next year. But I think there's a push for that to happen. He's good friends with some of the guys there now. That they got Cooper Kupp. They're going to have Robert Woods back. So he's going to be looking at this as an opportunity to have big numbers for that football team. It's kind of a scary thing to think about, but that's probably why the reason the 49ers are thinking about going after free agent corners because they need to be able to cover these guys. But Odell Beckham, I think the 49ers would make a phone call to. But I'm pretty sure he's going to end up back with the Los Angeles Rams.
I would agree with you there. I just don't. I don't see how it could happen. I don't see why he'd want to take himself out of that situation. If he doesn't tear the ACL and has a Super Bowl that he had, someone's paying him this offseason a nice chunk of money.
Oh yeah, but I mean, I think you always have to keep it in mind that remember Dallas, right? Why would Ken Norton Jr. leave winning 2 Super Bowls in a row with Dallas to come to the 49ers? Or why would Deion Sanders win a Super Bowl and then leave and go to Dallas? Anytime that there's money involved, you never know what's going to happen. And also what these guys ultimately, lifestyle they want to live. But that's why I think Odell Beckham stays in LA. This is a nice lifestyle for him.
He's going to probably enjoy it, and I'm not going to argue with you on that one. Speaking of another guy that might have a little bit harder time coming back to San Francisco or being in San Francisco, Mohamed Sanu. Mohamed Sanu did some nice things for the Niners early in the season. However, the development of Jauan Jennings really made it apparent that Mohamed Sanu's role had been replaced. He had a guy who was getting open consistently, a guy that was showing that he was one of the best blocking options in the league. As much as I like Mohamed Sanu and the veteran presence he adds to the locker room, and I know how much Deebo enjoys him being there, Brandin enjoys him being there, they're learning a lot from him. Jennings obviously picked up a lot from Mohamed Sanu. His age, everything that he adds to the table, I think there's some better options that may do some of the things he do that are younger and potentially cheaper.
No, I would like for there to be an upgrade at that position from Mohamed Sanu. I thought he played admirably. I thought he played, decent, but nothing great or out of this world. I mean, you're improving from the, him as the third receiver. I think you're looking to improve the third, receiver position in general. But I think Mohamed Sanu could be around the 49ers. I wouldn't be surprised if they didn't bring him back in free agency for the mere fact of filling out the 90-man roster just in case they're not able to pick up other players or they don't want to feel like they're beholden to drafting multiple, wide receivers in the draft. You have to make sure you have decent options, and he still provided himself to be a good option for the 49ers. So I think you got to keep him in the back of your mind as somebody they could bring in to fill out the 90-man roster. In no world do I want to see this guy make the 53-man roster. But you also don't want to go into the draft with glaring needs. You want to just have...
You don't want to be the Texans on PFF when you pull up the draft simulator and it says team needs everything.
Yeah, you don't want to have that because you want to be able to draft, the best player available. And one of the ways you do that is make sure you fill a lot of your holes, even with, lightly priced free agents.
Lightly priced free agents, or a nice thing if you're a team that's contending and trying to make sure you have depth everywhere and people understand your system. Speaking of depth everywhere, and speaking of guys who understand the system, and speaking of guys who may have a little bit more in the tank than some people think, Emmanuel Sanders. He made $6 million last year with the Buffalo Bills. The guy who is definitely ring chasing. I think of all the names on this list, we know 100% that Emmanuel Sanders is ring chasing, other than Odell Beckham, who's got his ring now. But Emmanuel Sanders, ring chasing, has played very well in the system, continues to show he can get open and play at a fairly high level. I don't think he's going to make $6 million. I don't think he did anything in Buffalo that makes it feel like, someone should pay this man $6 million. I think Buffalo is a place he could end up back in. Obviously, I think there's a lot of places he could end up back in. Any team that's contending and competing for a Super Bowl, Emmanuel Sanders would love to go play for. But is San Francisco one of those places?
I think it is because you got Kyle Shanahan, Deebo Samuel, and those guys are really good friends with him. And so I think anytime that you have a relationship like that, you could maybe lean on it. And you're right. He's looking to win a Super Bowl. You know where the 49ers were again in the NFC Championship game.
Almost in a Super Bowl.
You know what the 49ers are going to have? A big-time arm at quarterback. Those are things Emmanuel Sanders likes. I mean, that's part of the reason, he went and played with Josh Allen. He has a big-time arm. I think that this is, a place that he could land. I don't know how likely I would put it, but anytime you have a relationship like that, look at Mohamed Sanu. After they cut him and he went to Detroit, I didn't think he was going to end up back in San Francisco for 2021.
Nope.
So you never say never when it comes to, Kyle Shanahan and players that he's coached before or players that he has, a lot of respect for. So Emmanuel Sanders is somebody that I think is a possibility for the Niners. You're right. I don't think it's going to be $6 million. I think it would be less than that.
3?
I think $3 or $4 million. I think is a number that I think the Niners could live with and he could live with. But he's coming in to be your 3rd/4th wide receiver.
That's true.
Because he's going to have a different role than Jauan Jennings. He's going to find locations in the zone. But he's somebody a guy that really they can count on, that Trey Lance can count on, and that's important.
Better version of Travis Benjamin in the sense of a guy he develops repertoire with.
I think he's a better version of Mohamed Sanu.
I agree with you on that
because Mohamed Sanu would get to the right spots and be in the right places. Emmanuel Sanders proved that he can block, and he's just not as physical as Mohamed Sanu. But he definitely knows how to sit down in windows and
get open.
And that's something that you need for a young quarterback.
Correct. Feeling like he, you don't have to make it necessarily the most perfect throw in order for the guy to catch the ball. Because if he's creating enough separation, right, you have that wiggle room where you can miss a little bit on the ball placement and you don't feel like you have to be perfect as a quarterback, which is always great. And Emmanuel Sanders provides that aplenty. Still, no matter the age, no matter how old he gets. No matter how many injuries this man racks up, coming off Achilles injuries, coming off ACLs, whatever it is, the man just continues to get open and stay not just relevant in this league, but being a reliable wide receiver for quarterbacks all over the league.
Yeah, I mean, he can convert, third downs. I mean, if you go out in a 4 wide receiver set and you got Deebo, Brandin Aiyuk, Jauan Jennings, and then this guy, I think you're feeling good about it. I mean, that's a pretty good grouping to have out there all at once. You can spread the field, give Trey some looks, but yeah, he can do everything you need him to do. I mean, that's one of the great things about having a nice guy like that. Plus, you are moving on from your wide receiver coach. Emmanuel Sanders has been in that room, and we know how those players feel about him.
You're not wrong there, Ant. Moving off your wide receivers coach, getting a veteran guy in who's played in the system, who can instill and impart more wisdom and take a little bit of pressure off your new, younger kind of wide receiver coach there in San Francisco and Leonard Hankerson. That may help, and that may play a role as well, Ant. It could very well be the case. Let's talk about a couple of names that I don't think a lot of people are thinking about. Sammy Watkins, bigger guy, speedy guy, definitely playing for contenders, and playing with the Chiefs, playing with the Baltimore Ravens. Would San Francisco be the next spot?
Yeah, I think so. I think he's really getting to the part of his career now where it's going to be about ring chasing. It's going to be about him winning Super Bowls. And he's not a viable number 1 or number 2 receiver.
No.
But as a number 3, I think he's a nice piece. So I think you have to take a look at it. And then we know the 49ers had some sort of interest in him before he went to the Baltimore Ravens. So anytime they showed interest in the past, they'll probably show interest now. For the right price, yeah, you could bring somebody like this in. Because once again, it's a guy that takes the top off the defense. So a specific role. You put him in the John Ross, Will Fuller type, Valdez Scantling part of what you're looking for to add to your football team. So one of those guys you would think you're looking to add, Sammy Watkins makes sense in that avenue. There's things that he's not good at. There's things that he's not the best at. Like, he's not one of those guys that's going to be like Emmanuel Sanders and be able to find all the nooks and crannies in the zone coverage and get open. But what he can do is he can run really fast. And when you run really fast, you do other things for the football team. So a different type of receiver, but I think he could add to this team if it was the right price.
Sammy Watkins has had his best years in the NFL, and when he hasn't been wide receiver one. The reality of the situation.
Yeah.
And in San Francisco, you don't have to be wide receiver one. And that's why this works.
Don't even have to be wide receiver 2.
No, he gets to be wide receiver 3 and at times wide receiver 4. Because you have George Kittle. Let's not forget about that either. So this is almost a perfect situation. I think he went to Baltimore hoping he could not supersede himself into the wide receiver 1 category, but he knew he was a wide receiver 2 at the bare minimum, and at times, juggling with Andrews in terms of receptions and targets as a third option. I think for him, if you can go somewhere that has a lot of talent everywhere and you're not going to necessarily get breadcrumbs to be there, like the bare minimum, then you're in a great situation because you're going to be able to compete, contend. Your offense is going to put up a lot of points, and that means a lot of targets for you. What have we seen, though? Sammy Watkins, Kansas City with the Patrick Mahomes, a blank there for half a second. Oh, my goodness gracious. Patrick Mahomes in a big arm, right? Goes to Baltimore. You have Lamar Jackson, extremely athletic, fires a cannon. Again, the guy with a big arm. San Francisco, young, athletic, mobile quarterback, big arm. It translates. It makes sense. You can have success in those systems because of the speed, the things he does there. And he's a big guy. He's not a tiny wide receiver out there in space. This is not a small-bodied dude.
Yeah.
So this could work, and he would do it in a slightly different way than a John Ross would, or a Jakeem Grant with his size would. This is a bigger wide receiver, bigger body, bigger name. We'll see. I don't think he's going to command a whole heck of a lot of money either. He's coming off of the injury-riddled season that was for him in 2021. Again, if you're the Niners, you're looking to add depth. This is a great depth add at the wide receiver position, and definitely an upgrade over the names that we had in this room, like River Craycraft.
Yeah, no, he is. I mean, that's the thing. When you look at the roster at the end of the football season, there were some names on there that were almost cringe. Not Brett Swain cringe.
Not Brett Swain cringe. I will tip my hat to River Craycraft. He is not Brett Swain cringe.
Yeah, so I mean, the 49ers are definitely looking to upgrade the wide receiver room, and that's why when people say they're going to draft someone, I wholeheartedly agree. But I think they're going to address it in free agency as well, and that would be smart. I mean, they kind of tried to bring in all kinds of guys last year. It's time to figure this wide receiver position out to a point. I think they have defined roles for the top 3 guys, but now they have some open spots that need to be filled, and that's why some of these guys make sense.
They do make sense. James Washington, another interesting name out of Pittsburgh, younger guys in his mid-20s, has been a wide receiver 3 for Pittsburgh, has had flashes, has had moments, hasn't been fairly consistent. What do you think?
Yeah, explosive. I mean, that's the thing. You're trying to add explosive players to your team. Trey Lance needs, targets that go down the field. This guy likes to go down the field. So, I mean, there you go. But it's going to come down to money. You know what I mean? And once again, he's not like one of the first guys on my on my list.
No.
But when you get to wave 2 and wave 3, and a lot of these guys are off the books, if James Washington's still sitting there, then you have to at least consider it because he's a guy that's been a viable option in this league. And I think that he would be an upgrade in your wide receiver position. So, yeah, to me, it makes sense, as one of those wave 3 guys.
Correct. As a wave 3 guy, you're 100% right because he has proven things in this league, but he hasn't done it with consistency. He's not someone who has consistently gone out and wowed. He's had moments. He's had flashes, right? Second year in the league, 735 yards receiving. Everyone's like, we found our wide receiver 2 in Pittsburgh. Here he is, James Washington, and then 392 yards and 285. Right? Yeah. The production numbers dropped off. And some of that can be attributed to the elevation of Chase Claypool, what happened there, Deontay Johnson as well, and what he was able to do there as well. And he got pushed down the pecking order a little bit. But look, I think he's dynamic enough. And you're not asking this guy to come in and be wide receiver 2. You're asking this guy to come in and fill that wide receiver 3-4 role and just take the top off the defense, be able to do some things for you in the run game in terms of the run blocking and things of that nature, and just be a better option than some of these other guys we had. Be a better option than we had in Mohamed Sanu. Be a better option than we had in the Travis Benjamins of the world, in the River Craycrafts of the world. Just elevate the depth, and I think he does that.
Yeah, I love the stats that you just read. You know what that screamed to me? Affordable. You can't have guys that have great stats and be able to afford them as your third wide receiver.
Stunned.
So you have to have guys with potential, top end level potential. So yeah, when you read stats and you're like, oh, this guy hasn't done much in the league, I'm like, yes, that's what we want on our football team. A guy that can be, put in a certain role. Affordable is a good thing.
It is a good thing. And
Yeah.
speaking of affordable, you let this in. You literally, you lobbed this one over the plate.
There you
This segue, it couldn't have been any better. Because speaking of a guy who doesn't have production, who doesn't have the numbers, and the Niners drafted a few years back that you've been all for all the time.
Yeah.
The Cat Man, Dante Pettis, free agent. It's not happening, right?
To fill out your 90-man roster, maybe.
Maybe
who
that.
knows? I don't honestly think it would happen, but in my perfect world, he comes back and wears 14. I think that happens. So
For all of you non-day oneers, obviously Jalen Hurd, number 14, and has a wonderful, beautiful number 14 jersey
Yeah.
that's just waiting for someone to fill that void.
encompass it. Yeah, it's been Ray Wershing.
It's true.
But it could be Jalen Hurd. It was Jalen Hurd.
It was Jalen Hurd.
And then it could be other guys. Kareem Osgood maybe. I'm just looking for somebody to fill that role right now. And could it be the Cat Man? Could it be Dante Pettis? I don't think it'll be Dante Pettis. But yeah, we just thought it was fun to be talking about Dante Pettis. Do you think Dante Pettis is going to land somewhere in the league?
I would imagine somewhere.
I mean, could we go with the Washington Huskies? Could we get John Ross and Dante Pettis together? Maybe that unlocks his potential. It didn't work in New York, but it might work in San Francisco.
It's probably not gonna. No, I'm just gonna say no.
No, if I have a choice between Washington Huskies, I'm taking John Ross.
I'll take John Ross every day of the week,
Yeah.
Ant. Every day of the week. But let's move off of Dante Pettis, the Catman, into more realistic options for the
Okay.
49ers.
Darn.
Listen, Dante is realistic for the 90-man roster. I don't disagree with you there.
I think, yeah, if you need to fill out your roster, I'd rather them just draft a couple of guys, especially late guys. There are some guys that are in this draft that I think have upside. You can get late that are pretty fast guys. So I would definitely go the draft route. But if you're sitting there and you're like, you know what, we need a 12th wide receiver. Dante Pettis, he knows our system. Let's bring that guy and just shag some balls. Put him over there with Nate Sudfeld and let them run some routes. It sounds good.
Just put Dante. Caleb is screaming right now in the chat. I can see it. How dare you acknowledge him, man? You have to acknowledge him. Trent Sherfield.
Yeah.
This is a name we have to talk about. A name that coming into last season, you and I both watched tape and went 90-man roster fill-out spot. That's what this was. We didn't see anything on tape that wowed us. Nothing that made you think that this guy, other than special teams.
Yeah, special teams, fantastic.
Other than special teams, nothing that made this guy really stand out and separated him from everyone else on the roster. And then we got to training camp. And it was like, hey, Trent Sherfield's having a pretty good camp. Kind of surprising. And some of the cutback crew were really high when we got him. We were like, after about a week of training camp, it was like, it looks like this dude's about to shore himself up a roster spot, like the way he's playing.
Yeah.
He continued that, definitely shored himself up a roster spot. Was, again, like we anticipated and thought, phenomenal as a special teams guy for this team. In the punt game, in the kickoff game, I mean, he was absolutely, as a gunner, he is fan-freaking-tastic. However, the limitations showed up a little bit during the season. He didn't have as big of an impact as people thought. Do the Niners kick the tires on this and let this roll with Trent Sherfield again in the 2022 campaign?
Here's part of the problem with training camp. You go out there and you see explosive plays. You see, him making plays down the field. What you're not looking at is the fact he just beat Jared Maiden, or he just beat Deommodore Lenoir, or he just beat Dante Johnson. He's beating the guys he's supposed to beat. And yeah, Trey Lance gave him those opportunities to get the ball down the field. You know what else wasn't happening? A pass rush. All these things play into the reasons why Trent Sherfield looks so dynamic. And then early on, he looked dynamic in the preseason. He had the big play on the play action pass.
Mm-hmm.
It was great. I loved it. But Trent Sherfield proved during the season, I believe, that he is a 4th or 5th wide receiver on your team. In fact, I would love for him to be the 5th wide receiver for the 49ers. A guy that is competent, that can go out there and run the routes you need to be ran. And you can get him the football and he can make something happen with it when he gets it. But his real value is special teams. And so I can't have that guy being my number 3 or number 4 wide receiver. I really want him to be 5 or 6 because I think the special teams value only goes so far. And we just listed some guys that could be, maybe a little bit more expensive, but could actually have more dynamics on the special teams unit. So I don't know. I don't know if Trent Sherfield's going to be back on this roster. I wouldn't hate him coming back. I actually like Trent Sherfield.
As wide receiver 5, if he's the 5th wide receiver, then you're in a good spot.
Yeah, he's a great gunner. I mean, he does a lot of good things. And I think there's still development talent there that he can get better as a wide receiver.
Correct.
He's never going to be 1 and 2. He's not on that level. And I think that even Jauan Jennings,
Surpassed him.
So
Definitely.
I think that Sherfield has to work on his blocking, which I'm sure ticked Kyle Shanahan off some because he didn't do it very well. So I think there's other ways they're going to try to approach this. And I think through free agency and then the draft, they might push him down the bench a little bit. So priority will probably be special teams. You wonder if that's enough for him, because I think he does want to play wide receiver in this league. So he might be looking for a different opportunity. Maybe somebody like Miami would, afford him that opportunity.
You're not wrong there. Someone like Miami might afford him that opportunity and also knows the system and can do a lot of different things that they don't have to spend a whole lot of money on. He made $920K last year. He's not going to cost a whole heck of a lot of money.
No,
so
1.2 probably.
Yeah, that's the nice part and aspect of that situation there with him. We'll see. We'll see what that happens. We have one guy that we want to talk about that is a potential either trade or gets cut candidate, but Josh Reynolds is a very interesting name. Well, I got a couple, I guess. Josh Reynolds is an interesting name that I want to talk about first before we go over to a couple of the guys that you have.
Yeah.
Because of the 6'3" body, the 196-pound frame, fast guy, tall guy, 27, played with the Los Angeles Rams for a handful of years before he got traded to Detroit? I think he was either traded.
He got cut
and picked up by Detroit.
They picked him up, yeah.
Guy who had familiarity with Jared Goff there. Had himself a decent little showing there with Detroit for a bit, 19 catches for 306 yards. This is a name that I think is interesting just because he knows the system, knows the scheme, speedy guy, bigger guy. I think he'd be a great 90-man roster fill out and see what happens, kick the tires down and see if there's anything there still left in the tank. I don't think this is a name that anyone should be looking at as like, oh my God, this is a huge signing. But I think this would be a better option to bring in for the 90-man roster than some of the names that are out there or that the Niners have brought in the past.
Yeah, the Niners, I think, would have claimed him. I think they would have. I think everyone knew Detroit was going to take him, but I think they would have claimed him. It made a lot of sense. They were hurting in the wide receiver position at the time. I think he's somebody that's on the radar for sure. I think they would definitely bring this guy in. Having a big frame like that and then being able to run like he runs, I think he makes sense. So, yeah, you bring him in, you see what he can do. I think he, as of right now, especially, he would be one of the top 5 guys, for the 49ers, especially because they only have 2 on the roster. So you got that going for you. But
that's fair.
But I do think he's better than Trent Sherfield. I think that, he adds a different aspect to the game than Jauan Jennings does.
Agreed.
But he fits kind of some of the check, the boxes that you want to check for the 49ers wide receiver. So, yeah, he's someone to keep in mind.
And he's going to be dirt cheap.
Yeah, he's probably going to be cheaper. So, let's see what happens. Niners might be able to do it. I think that production, those numbers that he had right there playing for Detroit, I think could translate nice for the 49ers.
I don't know if people know this or not. They didn't have a great offense. So the fact that he's putting up those numbers and not a great offense with not necessarily the greatest O-line and injuries in the running back room, yes.
Yeah, after he got claimed, I purposely watched some of the games just to see how he did because he was a guy that we kind of mentioned in some of our episodes that, once he got cut, like, hey, maybe the Niners would be interested in this. So, yeah, he was kind of fun to watch, and he did a lot for Detroit. And he was one of their better receivers, so I do think he's an option for the Niners.
Definitely an option, Ants, but who's another name? Who's another name that you got? Who are you thinking?
Well, I mean, of course, we got to talk about Jarvis Landry.
100%?
Yeah, Jarvis Landry. He's kind of put it out there to the Browns that, hey, look, if you're not interested in winning and bringing me back in the right way.
And not restructuring me.
Yeah, then I am looking to move on. He just said it. He's looking to win a Super Bowl. I think he's seen what happened with Odell Beckham. Beckham got out of there. Beckham got the championship. Those two are so good, so close friends. I think Landry's looking for a right situation. So I think that, him in the trade market is something that you can possibly look at if the 49ers don't get the guys that they want. Another guy that, this guy's not fast at all by any means. He's Jauan Jennings fast. He runs like a 4.7, but what he does is he sits down in the zones in the right spot. He's very smart. He has good hands. So I think he's an option. He's had some injuries, so he won't be expensive in the trade market. But, what is he going to want to get?
Do you think the Niners could deal him for like a 6th?
I don't know. I think that there's going to be a team out there that values him more than a 6th-round pick. I wouldn't be shocked to see a team, throw a 4th-round pick that way.
Okay.
Just because the things that he could add to your football team, especially if you feel like you're like, for instance, the Packers. I'm not saying they'll actually do it. But if you lose Valdez-Scantling and you want to go a different route and you want to replace someone like Randall Cobb, maybe you go with this where it's a better option.
You're not wrong, man. And this is a guy who's consistently hovered around that 850 to 1,000-yard range pretty much every year that he's been in the league, with the exception of this past year, in which he dealt with extensive injuries, was playing through a lot of different stuff. But this is a guy who wants to be done right by an organization. He wants an organization to take care of him, value what he does, what he adds to the table for your team. That's going to treat him right and help him accomplish the thing he wants now. I think more than anything, which is a Super Bowl. I think you're right. I think he watched Odell Beckham go away. I think he watched Odell struggling here. I think he watched Odell leave. Odell find some success, and then when a Super Bowl was like, maybe it's just this place. Maybe Cleveland they just can't get it right. And I just need to get the heck out of Dodge. Like, just get me out of here now. I can go play out the last parts of my career for a team that wants to win championships, knows how to win championships, and is close to doing it. Because I think he thought they maybe had a chance this year, Cleveland early on, because all the hype after the way they finished the 2020 season coming into 2021. I think he watched it unfold and was just like, this team ain't close.
Yeah.
It's not there.
Yeah, there's one more guy, and that's Brandin Cooks. Brandin Cooks, he's looking to win a Super Bowl. He's made a ton of money, and he's came so close. He's with New England. He gets a concussion in the Super Bowl. He's with the Rams. They lose to New England. He is looking to win a Super Bowl, and he, from what I've been surmised and told, luckily he's from our area, is that he would love to play in the Bay Area. He would love to play for the 49ers in front of his home fans and friends. That is something that he would love to do. But he's got to be able to get out of that Texans contract, and then he's still under contract there, and he's still producing at a high level. So I don't know if the Texans are going to let go of him, but he fits the role that we've been talking about, right? A guy that could be the third wide receiver, that could take the top off, and in fact, he has the ability to be a first or second wide receiver on a lot of teams because his route running is very good, and he can take the top off like nobody else. So yeah, I think he's somebody that the Niners would be interested if he could get out of Houston. The question is, are they going to do that? They have the young quarterback. I'm sure they would love to keep this guy in their system. And
they're paying him, I think it's 12.5 is the base salary. The cap hit in total is $16 million. It's a lot of capital. It's a lot of cash. They only would incur $7.5 million though in dead cap.
That's part of the reason,
were to trade or cut him. So a lot of that money goes to the next team. And the next team could just resign, extend him a couple of years, or restructure that deal as well and save some money there.
He's trying to get cut.
I think he is trying to get cut.
Yeah,
they voided 2 years of that contract, so he's got $7.5 million coming his way between 2023 and 2024 from that deal with the Texans from when he got there from the Rams. So there's 2 voidable years already at the end of that contract. That contract's been front loaded now. I think he would prefer to just get cut, get paid that money, and then take a cheap deal for a contender, knowing that he's going to be making about $14 million this year doing it that way.
Yeah, and you don't know how many years are left for him. So
no, he is only 29, but he's played a lot of games in this league. He's played a lot of seasons in this league, and he's dealt with some injuries.
And he's still dynamic. I mean,
extremely
dynamic. I would love to see him in the system. I don't know if I thought it was kind of far-fetched until I started hearing some things about it.
Well, look at that. I mean, that's some breaking news for your behind right now. Brandin Cooks from this area, Ant, has been hearing some things from people around in this space and is thinking that there's a chance that Brandin Cooks may finagle his way out of Houston.
And this isn't just no source. This is like somebody that's like directly connected to him. No, this isn't like, I heard down by the...
I was over in an area. I was at his old high school, and some guy who knows his brother's sister's girlfriend.
Yeah, not that. Somebody that's actually, immediately close to him. And it wasn't shaped like, he's 100% trying to get out. He's trying to cover the 49ers. Like, I don't want anyone to think that. He would like to be able to choose a contending team, and he would love to play for a Bay Area team where he can play in front of friends and family.
Well, there's only one Bay Area team left, Ant, so I wonder who that could be.
Bingo.
I wonder who it could be. Cutback crew, though. Let us know if there was any wide receivers that we missed, that we need to talk about, or are you done with everyone that we just said, and it's time to focus on draft wide receivers because that's all you care about. You saw all the speed coming out from the combine, and you're like, you know what? Just give me some of those guys. I'm fine with that. We want to hear from you in the comment section down below, so comment away, and while you're down there commenting, don't forget to like. Don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. Hit that notification bell, Ant, and something special for those people on Spotify, right? We want them to do a little bit more than just follow us.
Yeah, go ahead. If you're listening to an audio version of this podcast, go ahead and give us a rating and then leave a breakdown of it. Let us know what you think about it, a nice review of us. If you listen to the end, hopefully you liked it. But yeah, I think that this is something, that is good for our podcast. You know what else is good? Is remembering that John Ross ran a 4.2240 in his combine. So just because you see fast times doesn't mean fast people aren't available. And fast times don't always equate to great production if you're in the wrong system.
Oh, Ant, it's not always a guarantee that just because someone's quick that they're going to do big things.
No, ask the Raiders.
Big yikes, Ant. Poor Darius Hayward-Bay.
They got Darius Hayward-Bay. We got Michael Crabtree.
Still remember that draft?
Yeah.
Still threw my shoe across the room. You were kidding me. Darius, you're going to let us get Michael Crabtree? Hot dog.
I was so excited. When at number 9 they said Darius Hayward-Bay, I just started yelling.
They did it.
I was like, we got Michael Crabtree. The card's not even in. I already know it's Crabtree. I was so excited.
It was fantastic. That was a great draft. And who knows? Crazy things happen in the draft all the time.
What if I told you there's a player in this draft I comp to Michael Crabtree?
Well, then I think everyone definitely needs to subscribe so that way when we get to draft wide receivers, you know who that comp is. Don't miss out on any of this great free agency content and even better draft content coming your way not too long down the road and down the pipeline. We'll see you on the next one, Cutback Crew and the Faithful. Until then, stay safe.
Remember, the right way
is always the 49ers way.